The modern solution to the family car is the SUV, a jacked up hatchback that sacrifices performance, handling, comfort, space, weight, style, economy and value, all in the name of about 1/4 of an inch of extra ride height to perfectly complement the front wheel drive that most of them have. Now back in the 80s, your family car was much simpler. Take a sales rep saloon car and add a box on the back to create an estate car. And we've got two stalwart champions of the 80s estate car era right here. From Ford, the Sierra estate. The jelly mould gets a rounded glass house on the back to retain that futuristic styling for the load lugging version. And from Austin Rover, the Montego estate, sticking to the tried and tested formula of squaring off a saloon car to get maximum cargo capacity. So, who did it best? But first, our friends at Lancaster Insurance are running monthly giveaways. You can win all sorts, from experience days to tools, restaurant vouchers and tech. So check the video description for full details and to enter. During the 60s and 70s, Ford's all-conquering Cortina had dominated the UK sales charts. It really was a firm favourite. But by the 1980s, with the Mark V Cortina, which it's worth remembering shared most of its underpinnings with the Mark III Cortina of 1970, it was feeling a bit dated. So for its replacement, Ford went all out to create something modern and radical. Launched in 1982, the Sierra featured aerodynamic, forward-thinking styling. And it was divisive at first. It certainly wasn't conventional. It had been nicknamed in development the jelly mould. But that new slippery bar of soap type design meant it was a full 30% more aerodynamic than the Mark V Cortina. And that gave two main advantages: noise at high speed and fuel economy, two key buying factors for the fleet market that Ford were keen to retain. On top of that curvy, futuristic exterior styling, the interior was more modern too, with an all-new sweeping dashboard which, in an aim of imitating BMW's, was actually angled towards the driver to give kind of a cockpit feel to it. And it works, it really is a nice place to sit with a commanding view of the road ahead. But whereas the styling and the interior were modern, the underpinnings very much weren't. In fact, the Sierra shared most of its engines, gearboxes and suspension components with the Cortina. But there are two very good reasons for that. They're known, they're tried and tested to be durable by the fleet market, and garages could easily maintain them. And two, it saved costs. By not developing all new mechanical components, Ford could keep the price of the brand new Sierra on a par with the outdated Cortina. And Ford updated those components to bring them into the 1980s. There were improved carburetors, some engines got fuel injection for the first time, and an optional 5-speed gearbox was available to once again improve fuel economy on the motorway. So does the Sierra drive like a box of reheated leftovers, or is it a more modern feeling car? Well, in truth, a bit of both. The fuel-injected engine does feel more modern. It picks up cleanly, it's smoother, it's less fluffy than an old-school carburetted engine is. The steering is nice and light, and it is more direct than the old non-power assisted steering that you got on the Cortina. But the suspension is old and it feels it. It's floaty, it's wallowy, it pitches around, and in truth, this 1980s car doesn't feel any more direct or precise than the Mark III Cortina that was developed in the late 60s. But don't forget, this isn't a sports saloon. It's meant to be a practical family load lugger. And for doing that, the Sierra really is rather nice to drive. The steering's light, the engine gathers pace smoothly, and the ride is relaxing. If a little bit floaty and wobbly over the big bumps, it doesn't compose itself very well if you hit a bump at speed. If you like the looks, but you wanted a bit more boot space, there was a Sierra Estate available from launch, and it was an uber practical wagon. It retained the curvy, futuristic styling of the front end with wraparound glass that made the whole rear end look far more modern and shapely than that of most of its rivals. But crucially, the Sierra got its pricing right. In hatch or estate guys, it was the same sort of money as comparable rivals, but this was a modern car with that more modern interior and that sharper styling. And Ford, doing what they always do, they offered an eclectic range of trim levels and engines, so there really was something for everyone. The futuristic look and feel, the comfort, the practicality in estate guys, the eclectic range of trim levels and engines available, that familiar Ford badge and great value, meant that the Sierra won hearts and Britain ultimately fell in love with it. So much so that it became the 10th best-selling car in Britain ever. The Sierra really was an icon of its era. But if you were shopping for a practical estate car back in the 1980s, other options were available. By the 1980s, at British Leyland, times they were a-changing. The Triumph Acclaim had signalled a new era for the company, where finally BL could be associated with quality and reliability. And buoyed by that success, Leyland decided to chase after the fleet market, where Ford had traditionally enjoyed all the success. And to show they were serious about leaving the past behind, when BL launched the Austin Montego in 1984, they used it to replace not only the ancient Marina-derived Ital, but also the Princess range in one fell swoop. And whereas the Sierra in '82 had stuck to the slightly old-fashioned rear-wheel drive design, the Montego was built on an all-new front-wheel drive transverse engine platform. And that engine was all new as well, the single overhead cam S-Series. And where the Sierra had screamed modern and radical when it was released, BL were keen that the Montego do the same. Look at some of the details that make this look like a modern car. All Montegos had body-coloured bumpers, which makes it look more natural than the two-tone bumper design that the Sierra initially launched with. Unfortunately, whereas the Sierra featured that cool wraparound cockpit dashboard that felt high quality, the Montego's ergonomics were dreadful. Front and centre you've got an ashtray, immediately below it is the blower fan, which means in all probability any stray cigarette ash will get blown right across the interior. The heating and ventilation controls are absolutely unfathomable. The fan speed and the temperature controls are obscured by the indicator stalk and the steering wheel, and the button that puts the air on your feet and the windscreen is so badly placed that unless you turn the steering wheel to the left, you don't even know it's there. Whereas in the Sierra you can knock on everything and it feels solid and well bolted in and refined. Everything in the Montego rattles a little bit and shakes and feels like it could fall off or break at any minute. And it's not like ours is a bad example. Ours has done 32,000 miles and these cars were renowned for having poor quality everywhere when they were brand new. But for as much as the cockpit was a bit of a design mishap, the estate Montego absolutely wasn't. It featured a low, flat, deep boot floor, and that meant it was as spacious as possible. There were 2 extra seats, which meant you could carry 7 passengers in a Montego, which the Sierra never offered you, and when you weren't using those seats, they folded flat into the boot floor so they didn't encroach on your luggage space. The Montego estate was such a success, in fact, that Roy Axe actually won a Design Council award for the estate specifically. And in their own words, a Design Council award recognises great design that improves lives and makes things better. So is the Montego all styling and no substance? Of course, the Sierra uses those dated Cortina underpinnings. The Montego, though, used that more modern front-wheel drive platform. But British Leyland and BMC before that did have experience with front-wheel drive, and in some ways, you can tell. The steering is a lot more feelsome than the Ford. In this particular car, it's not power assisted, so at low speed, it is a bit heavier than the Sierra, but it's more direct. You've got more of an idea of where the front wheels are pointing. The body roll is still fairly considerable, but it doesn't wallow like the Ford. It feels more controlled. It feels fairly composed, dare I say it. And don't think the Montego gives up anything to the Sierra in ride comfort. That soft, long travel suspension does its thing and makes this a superbly comfortable car to cruise around in. Just soaks up the bumps. Honestly, if it weren't for all the rattles in here, half the time you wouldn't even know you were going over a bump. But as we've covered before, the Montego's quality and reliability issues early on badly hurt its sales, both on the fleet market and to the family car market that would have bought the estate version. The Montego never recovered from that early negative reputation. And even today, if you ask someone of a certain age about the Austin Montego, they'll say, rubbish when they were new, rubbish now. But taken as a car to use every day, a practical load lugger, the Montego has got plenty going for it. It's a really rather lovable old thing. I think a What Car report from the early 90s says it best about the Montego, really. By the end, it had matured into a really decent car, and yet, no one noticed. This isn't the most exciting twin test that we've ever done, but on the other hand, it is probably one of the most useful. because unlike a lot of classics that you have to use sparingly at the weekends and then tuck away over the winter, these two, get them under sealed and you can use them every day of the year, come rain, shine or snow. You could even put a tow bar on the back and pull a caravan with them if you want to. But which one of these 80s estates do I pick? Well, it depends on what you want from it. The Montego is the most practical. It's got the biggest boot, and those extra seats in the boot and the split folding middle row means this is by far and away the most versatile of the two for carrying loads and carrying people. But the Sierra is probably the more well-rounded car. It looks and feels more modern, it's more competent doing every task you need to do day to day. It is better built than the Montego, and you're probably going to have an easier time finding Ford parts than you are bits and pieces for an obsolete Austin Rover product. The Ford also feels a bit more premium, and in upmarket trim it can genuinely nudge into Mercedes territory. But there is an underdog factor to the Austin. There's a charm to it that the Ford somehow doesn't have because it had all that extra power behind it. The Sierra is arguably the better car, but my choice, just barely, is the Montego. This video is proudly sponsored by Lancaster Insurance. Give them a call on 01480 400 889 for an insurance quote on your classic car. And don't forget to click the link in the video description to enter their latest competition.